So there was a situation a little while back with the VA Marin M and the game Hades 2. This is something we have very briefly discussed in a few other videos regarding the Genshin VA stuff, because this situation was brought up by some people throughout that entire situation. Because this actually occurred before the Genshin VA stuff, but it was kind of a similar situation in a few ways. Particularly with the VA, that being Marin M. seemingly trying to get Hades 2 to become a union game. And I say seemingly because, well, I got to read what exactly happened with you guys right now, but I believe that's like a TLDR of what happened. The rest of the TLDR being that this attempt to flip the game union failed spectacularly and seems to have actually hurt the VA's career and reputation. So, well, let's take a look at what exactly happened here as mentioned, starting with this post from our games titled Marin M. Hades 2 VA. And a quote here from Blue Sky. Marin M. saying, "It's possible you may hear me get recast in a particular game that is very popular. As a matter of fact, let's actually go to Blue Sky and take a look at this post directly. There we go, that's better. So Marin M. had said, once again, it's possible you may hear me get recast in a particular game that is very popular. If I am, it was not because I stepped away from the character willingly, smiley face. It's because the employer refused to flip to an interim agreement, presumably. It would be super helpful if you wrote a giant email asking them to flip for their actors." Oh my gosh, this is so obnoxious. And so we've got a great response right here that says, if said giant developer signs the interim, how many non-union VAs currently on the project will potentially have to be recast? We need more information before coming to any conclusions. It's not as simple as not signing equal company bad for projects already in development. Great point. Something we've talked about a lot before regarding these sort of things, these sort of matters. And it goes back to another point that I've made before, which is how selfish these VAs are. They are willing to negatively impact the project, obviously negatively impacting the non-union talent working on said project, but also the project overall when they write things like this, because they're interfering with the project itself. Even more so when they're also striking against the project, trying to say, oh, we're just doing the right thing because we're trying to get them to sign the agreement. That's all they need to do. Okay, and in striking the game, you're negatively impacting that business for the artists, the developers, the players, the list goes on and on and on. And they're willing to do all that while also trying to look like they're like some like heroic, virtuous people and simultaneously trying to manipulate bunch of people online to also support their agenda that really only benefits them, while they, as mentioned, simultaneously try to act all virtuous and heroic in trying to make it seem like they're helping everyone with what they're doing when they certainly are not. And also take a look at the date that this was made, February 20th. So I mentioned before in previous segments as well that the whole like Genshin VA strike thing was already getting backlash for a number of months before the Jacob Takanashi situation occurred, because it was. And this is kind of similar to the comments people were making about the whole like Genshin strike as well. Initially, there was pretty good amount of support. You could maybe even say like a lot of support for the strike. But as the months went on and the strike continued and characters were unvoiced and these VAs kept going off and making themselves seem like unreliable, non-trustworthy, more and more people began to look into what was really going on and coming to this sort of assessment right here that we see being sent in this situation about Hades, but was also being applied by others to the whole like Genshin strike. So yeah, we've got a couple parallels going on here. This sort of parallel, what Marin is trying to do here is a parallel in of itself. And then also, it's a parallel to specifically Karina Betger, the ex-VA of Paimon and Genshin Impact, because about a month, maybe like 3 weeks, or around a month before the Jacob Takanashi thing occurred, Karina had made a TikTok video, short video on TikTok, basically saying, according to my recollection, hey, y'all love me for my work as Paimon, right? Well, you all should totally email Hoyoverse and tell them to sign the SAG interim agreement. Every one of you, go and email Hoyoverse. And she was getting called out in the comments. Similar to this. People being like, no, don't do that. This can negatively impact the non-union people working on the game, etc., etc. So it's really funny that shortly before Karina tried that with Genshin, Marin over here was trying it with Hades. Now, this obviously didn't go well for either of them. But as we know, Karina took it even further, because when Darkos88 covered the TikTok thing about like, hey, Paimon VA said we should do this, and then in his comments, people were like, no, you shouldn't do that. And he made a follow-up video being like, my bad. I shouldn't have promoted this. Well, Karina found out about all that stuff and apparently also found out about my coverage of that all happening and made that infamous crash out video where she's like, don't trust YouTubers. YouTubers are all liars. Blah, 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 blah. You know, great times, guys. Great times. Oh, by the way, what's really funny is Marin M. Miller never responded to this person. Of course. It's been very consistent with these VAs. Every time people bring this point up about how it can negatively impact non-union talent, they like 90% of the time just completely dodge it and never say anything. Like 10% of the time, maybe just lie about what it would do, act like it's really not going to hurt anyone. A part of that 10% also, I guess, would be, a part of the lie would be, oh, all they have to do is sign a Taft-Hartley. It's so easy. It'll be no problem for them, when obviously it's not that easy, and it probably will be a problem, actually. Nevertheless, we can see that some people on Blue Sky were defending Marin M. Miller, and then we'll take a look at the backlash as it proliferated, because Marin got overtly called out over on like Reddit and stuff. But let's take a look at this really quick. Some, what's the word? Polarity? No, that's not the word. The word is a duality. Yes, duality. So first at the top, Cosmic says, disappointing to see they aren't willing to stand behind the voice actors who helped bring these characters to life. And we got this one that says, I hope they recast you. I hate how SAG forces non-union VA to join their union, making voice work more and more US-centric and corporate instead of a global scene. I hate to see Darren Korb join SAG. Good luck getting a new job after sicking your social media to an employer and stirring drama. We can see more duality right here with this user Jeff saying, I hope they turn around that decision. I wrote them a letter on their contact page. For people wanting to, oh my gosh. For people wanting to write the company as well, here's a guide and what I wrote. Don't copy and paste verbatim, though. Be true to your thoughts on their games and the voices who acted in them. Oh my gosh. Well, I sure hope they recast you now that we have more context. Manipulative, entitled brat. So once again, yeah, duality there. Take a look at a few more of these. Let's see here. Well, dang, I would never think this one company would flat out refuse. I am craving a change because I look up to them so much. And obviously no one is perfect, but this is so sad. Last one we'll read. I sent them some mail. You did wonderful work, and I sincerely hope you get to continue with them and that they treat you the way they oughta. No amount of savings or convenience is worth losing the trust of great creative folks in an age as dark as this one. Yeah, okay, Maria. Yeah, my bad. Folks, not frokes. What the frick is frokes? But I'm going to leave that error of speech in there because, like, this stuff's too silly, dude. I'm probably going to mess my words up more as this goes on. I'm like laughing half the time as I read this nonsense. So let's take a look over at Reddit and see where people are calling Marin out even more so. And then Marin makes a follow-up post, like some like pity post it looks like, but we'll see. Oh, and who wants to start taking bets that I'm going to get called on Blue Sky a Nazi for making this video? I mean, they're already calling me a Nazi right now. Maybe that's a bad bet. Yeah, it's kind of like a setup. Wait, I'll be betting that they call me a Nazi, and if anyone wants to bet that they don't, that's the bet I'll take. Easy money. So as mentioned, going back over to Reddit, in the post that was made on our games about Marin's Blue Sky post, where Marin was asking people to email the Hades devs, the company, to try to get them to sign the agreement, all that stuff. Top comments, such as, Supergiant employs both union and non-union VAs, and SAG rules have quite a few provisions about that, including mandatory minimal ratios of union to non-union workers. It's not as simple as a contract with one actor. Agreeing to it may force them to change all other VA contracts or seek to hire new actors to reach the mandated ratio. Also, as the game is still in EA early access, and it is a while until release, I think it would be stupid of any businessman to hurry and sign some interim contract as opposed to watching and waiting till this mess settles. Those quote-unquote interims only make sense when your project needs to be done tomorrow, right now, yesterday. Take note of this comment that says, yeah, after the whole Bayonetta thing, I'm pretty much a wait and see how this all pans out kind of person. Same with the whole Mick Gordon thing. Because over on a different subreddit, there was also a post about Marin's attempt to try to flip Hades Union. And a top response there reads, like people are saying in the other thread, I'm waiting for more to come out of this before I make any judgments because of the Bayonetter incident has left me a little wary. Now, I find this really interesting because myself and a lot of people who watch my videos, we've known how corrupt the VA industry is for literal years. I talked about it a lot throughout 2019 and into 2020, and then on and off sporadically throughout the last number of years, like, you know, between 2020 and now, so to speak. But for some people, the whole Bayonetta situation was their first wake-up call to how corrupt the industry is. For other people, it's this whole Genshin thing. But it's very interesting just seeing like more and more people, or let me rephrase, it's very interesting seeing the corruption in the VA industry become more common knowledge to more and more people. And I think it's a great thing because obviously it's not a great thing that it's corrupt. It's a great thing that people are aware of it though, because I don't want to see people getting taken advantage of by these VAs. And I don't want to see people like getting disappointed when they like look up to a VA and then they find out how terrible it is. So it's better to have expectations tampered immediately when it comes to English VAs, in my opinion. And that's a sad thing to say, but it is not just a sad thing, it is a sad reality. Back over on the Reddit games post about this situation, more and more people would continue to call out Marin M. Miller. For example, this top comment that says, "That passive-aggressive smiley is so annoying, holy smokes. Own your statements with none of this garbage." Getting a response that reads, "The only Hades VA doing this so far as well. Something about this just rubs me the wrong way. One passive-aggressive post and their followers are grabbing their forks without even taking a second to think for themselves." You gotta love how it's such a common thing from people on Blue Sky and that sort of demographic of individuals, because they often talk about how they're so great at critical thinking and everyone else isn't. No one else thinks critically except us. Meanwhile, they don't even think like, hold on. Meanwhile, not only are they incapable of critical thinking, they're incapable of base level thinking on their own. We'll take a look at a few more top comments here before going over to Marin's response to all this backlash. This one reads, "Hoping there's more to this than meets the eye. Supergiant is one of the few companies where I've genuinely believed them when they say people are more important than product. I've always deeply, deeply respected they can put out such quality games while being anti-grunge." Response to them reads, "Always worth waiting to get more information and hear the other side before you get out the pitchforks. Remember when the Bayonetta VA kicked up a fuss about being replaced only for it to come out that they wanted her on board? But she made such outrageous demands to reprise her role as Bayonetta 3, they were all but forced to recast her? Yeah, then she went to the internet with a whole sob story, making like 4 different videos about it, trying to rile up the internet as her personal army. It was so pathetic." Something we see a lot of these VAs really doing though, or similar things. And what's an immediate red flag for me here is that this seems to preempt something that hasn't been made official yet, and the call to action for something we have literally no actual information on. This has a very strong, "I just messed up during negotiations and now I'm using social media to strong arm them into a second chance" energy. Of course, that's me also making a judgment with little information, but I'm also not immediately going to start review bombing. And the response there reads, "I agree, Taylor," referring to the Bayonetta situation, and the ex-VA for Bayonetta, "Taylor caused so much trash, and as soon as the truth came out, immediately tried to sweep it under the rug and move on with her life." Quote unquote. Not that I'm discrediting Miss Miller outright, but I will reserve judgment until we get both sides. Getting some more duality, let's take a look at this comment that seems to be pro-Miller and pro-SAG AFTRA. That reads, "Let us hope this is a misunderstanding, since Supergiant's fans would likely be a crowd sensitive to not having solidarity with a union. If they are bypassing a union strike, that is pretty messed up in general, regardless of one's beliefs. Collective bargaining is a power and a right of workers everywhere. If they hired a scab, that looks real bad on them. And that VA is likely not going to get many jobs in the future, as they'll be blackballed by the union. The VA, work in Hades, was a defining trait for many people, as it was absolutely phenomenal. There wasn't a moment for many folk, myself included, that I felt the voice didn't fit the character or setting. Please hedge yourself that this may not be true or the full story, but you can also reach out to the company here to give them your thoughts on the matter, or at least issue a statement." So that's linking to supergiant.com/contact. Basically saying like you should go email them. Edit. "The anti-union stance in America is awful. Reasonable statements get downvoted. This is why we're screwed right now, y'all. People literally died to form unions and get basic worker rights." Bro, don't pretend like you care about workers' rights when you're fine calling other workers derogatory terms and essentially fine with, or maybe even happy that they would get blackballed by the union. Response reads, "Video game companies have repeatedly replaced seasoned voices with non-union actors. Capcom went in and swapped every single voice actor in Resident Evil. WB Games replaced tons of actors from Mortal Kombat. Nobody noticed or cared because being part of SAG doesn't mean you're an inherently better actor than any non-union actor." Well, SAG claims otherwise. Like literally on their website, they do claim that union actors are better, which you can see over on sagaftra.org on Union Myth 1, which I've talked about many times in the past, where, as mentioned, they try and say that union actors are better, and the whole thing is just so pompous. These people are so obnoxious. And so that comment ends by saying the replacement voices all sounded great and the game sales broke franchise records, following up what they said about the union actors getting replaced by non-union actors. And another bootlicker would say, "There's no excuse for Supergiant to not use union VAs for all roles. I was planning to get Hades 2 on full release. If they're really locking out union workers, then I won't be buying at all. People are like, should they fire Darren Korb? Should he be forced to join union and pay dues? Screw over non-US VAs, am I right? Okay, so the backlash against Marin M. Miller continued to proliferate, and Marin's campaign against Supergiant continued to fail worse and worse. And that takes us here to this very important update where Supergiant responds and says, voice talent has been integral to each of our games. Recently, questions arose here about how we work with our voice talent, which we want to address. Actors breathe life and humanity into everything we do, and over time, we've gone from working with a small number from our team to dozens of individuals from around the world. We offer the strongest AI protections in the industry to our talent, as we think their work is irreplaceable. Our games are intentionally made by human beings. No generative AI is being used in the creation of the voiceover, artwork, or any other content that goes into them. We have not recast any of our characters in Hades 2, and wish to keep working with each and every member of our wonderful cast. We have respected and will continue to respect any actor needing to pause work during the ongoing SAG-AFTRA video game strike. While none of our games have ever been subject to SAG-AFTRA's contracts for a variety of reasons, we wish SAG-AFTRA the best in their negotiations to compel larger signatory studios to provide the kind of protections we think actors deserve. Signed, Supergiant Games. What's really hilarious here is in the comments to Supergiant, we've actually got Kyle McCarley, go figure. You probably remember this person during the ongoing Genshin strike coverage, as he would routinely pop up on Blue Sky bootlicking for SAG-AFTRA and being very much pro trying to get Hoyo to sign the agreement. If I recall, he was also one of the people going after Erica after Erica came forward with information that was certainly not good for SAG-AFTRA. In other words, Kyle here, who's VA for Mob and Mob Psycho 100, amongst a number of other roles here, as you can see in his bio, is very much one of those cliquey VAs. And Bro actually responds to Supergiant here saying, I'm certain SAG-AFTRA would love to work with you. Could save you a lot of headaches. Oh my gosh, gives the email. Supergiant and some fans in these comments may benefit from clearing up some misconceptions about how SAG-AFTRA operates. The Interactive Committee has offered Supergiant waivers to allow developer cast members to retain their roles without joining the union. International actors work on SAG-AFTRA productions all the time. They fall outside of SAG-AFTRA's jurisdiction, so they don't have to join, while still benefiting from the protections offered by a SAG-AFTRA contract. SAG-AFTRA contracts do not inherently inflate a budget, and the tiered budget agreement makes it possible for games with low budgets to cast union actors at a steep discount. If you have any more questions or concerns, please ask. The Interactive Committee has put in work to break down barriers to working with the union. If you think there's an insurmountable hurdle, if either never existed, the committee has already removed it, or they're available to discuss options. Like peak gaslighting here in my opinion. Oh my gosh, dude, it's so pathetic. For example, where he's trying to say that SAG-AFTRA contracts do not inherently inflate a budget, to my understanding, most likely they will. And the tiered agreements just make it mitigated how inflated it'll be. But it doesn't mean that it won't get inflated. And then right here where he's trying to act like international actors can work on SAG-AFTRA productions and it's so easy. No, because that goes back to the whole like Taft-Hartley thing that we were talking about before, to my understanding. So you got to beg for a Taft-Hartley and hope you get one. And then you're going to need to potentially beg for more in the future and hope you get one. Moving on though, Supergiant's official statement would get covered by GameDeveloper.com. And that would get responded to by Marin M. Miller, who says, the author's request for comment, presumably this referring to the journalist who wrote the article that we just showed right here by GameDeveloper.com, titled Supergiant Denies Recasting Hades 2 Actor Over Interim SAG-AFTRA Contract Request. Once again, Marin says, the author's request for comment went to spam, and this was published without it. When I replied, the author was out of office. So in the interest of saving time, here is my full response. Let's take a look at this. Marin says, allow me to be clear. In my perspective, Supergiant has ignored my request to put them in touch with union reps for years to see if we could get this game covered. So that seems to be an attempt to make Supergiant look bad here, but you actually just made them look based, so congratulations on that. I started asking at the end of the last game. I accepted the reprisal to have more footage that proved I was able to match roles I booked before my transition, and told them that I believed they were not taking advantage of their employees. However, that was almost a year ago. My health insurance plan is doubled in price, and I do not have a qualifying life event to delay the cost of a better plan with tax penalties when I am gearing up for 3 gender-affirming surgeries. How is this Supergiant's responsibility? What, what the heck, dude? Ain't no way. Unlike their full-time employees, I do not have the ability to qualify for pension and retirement any other way than through a performers union until the government provides a system funded by the taxes I already pay, taxes that are 7% higher as a non-union performer. So is Marin a part of the union or not? I'm going to assume non-union performer just means under the context of working on a game that's not union, even though Marin, I'm assuming, is a part of the union, which, by the way, would be a breach of global rule 1, but we already know that these people are very, what's the word? Want the cake and eat it 2 types. Continuing. Oh, wait, no, I'm not continuing, actually. Hold on, I'll add on to that, as a matter of fact. Breaching global rule 1 also means that these union actors are taking the jobs from non-union actors who should be getting that role. Just saying. Very selfish. And then, yeah, I Googled this. I don't know if this is true, but on Google, if you say, is Marin M. Miller part of SAG AFTRA? It says, yes, Marin M. Miller is part of SAG AFTRA. I went to Marin's website to see if there's any more information about that. And I didn't see anything else about being SAG AFTRA, so make of all that what you will. But I did see this as a quick side note. Apparently, Marin also works in ADR script writing and localization supervising. And for those that don't know, localizing, like English localization industry, is also very corrupt, so this is not surprising to see at all. I don't want to go on a whole tangent about that, though. Feel free to look at my videos on the English localization industry if you want more info on that. I think I even have a playlist, too, actually. So I'll put that playlist, if it exists, I think it does, in the description of this video. And let's return to this post because there was still a lot to go over here. We left off here. Furthermore, a game of Hades' size and notoriety leaves me vulnerable to AI cloning outside of their ecosystem. And a non-union contract gives me no teeth to enforce it, unless I have money. My roof has been leaking for 4 years because the people in my building are too poor to raise HOA fees. Many of us are still struggling from the financial destruction of the pandemic. Dude, this just feels like gaslighting so much. Why are you bringing this up? Why are you pretending like this is Supergiant's fault? Or like, even if you don't want to say fault, why are you bringing this up at all? This is just guilt tripping and stuff, dude. At least in my opinion. And I am being ignored by my elected politicians while telling them that the declaration of 2 sexes leaves me vulnerable to being detained and having my legitimate identification documents confiscated or questioned. I cannot shoulder the physical, mental, or monetary burden of being a non-union actor, especially when there are waivers that I have witnessed the union create for clients who make free and no-budget games. For years, I have fought tirelessly to make the union more accessible to clients, and I am confident we can find a mutually beneficial agreement. Oh my gosh. This is so freaking crazy. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but yeah, no, again, I feel like this is crazy gaslighting, like insane levels of guilt tripping and manipulative text here. By the way, let's go back to the very top where Marin said, I accepted the reprisal to have more footage that proved I was able to match roles before I booked before my transition. Really, is that the only reason? Because I have a hunch you were probably also doing this for the paycheck, which is fine. Like, you got to get paid. But why are you acting like that's not a factor? Oh, I booked this because I wanted an example that I can sound the same. Like, no, you probably also want to get paid, right? It's just so weird. These people are like so weird and like manipulative with the way they phrase things, like only giving half truths or, oh my gosh, dude, I can't even. I need a breath of fresh air. I can't believe this is a real freaking statement that was made. I apologize for being kind of disjointed reading this stuff. I think you can understand though. I feel like I'm being gaslit in real time as I read this, so it's kind of disgruntling, to put it nicely. Let's just get through the rest of this. Holy smokes. But the ball is in their court. Recast or flip. I am willing to advocate on their behalf to this system to help everyone keep their jobs and to avoid the interruption of production. I love this project. This whole decision has shattered my heart. Thank you. Nah, I don't believe this for a second. What it looks like is you're extremely selfish in trying to use your position with this company to have some leverage over them, to try and tempt them to sign an agreement because you want certain things covered potentially by the union that you need to meet a certain criteria for their healthcare benefits and stuff. I don't think you care about the other people working on this game. As a matter of fact, I think it's the opposite. I think you're willing to screw them over for the sake of trying to get your healthcare covered or something like that for these surgeries that you're talking about. Like, this stuff, in my opinion, does not add up, and it actually makes you look so bad. And now I'd like to apologize to you guys, apologize to my viewers, because I don't think my coverage on this part was very good. As mentioned, I felt like disjointed in my coverage here and stuff. This was just uncomfortable feeling. I felt like I was being gaslit in real time as I read this, and I think that probably reflected in how I covered it. So I apologize if my coverage was a bit like messy and or confusing. So thank you for understanding. And yeah, you got my apologies though. I think I could have done better, but it is what it is. I'm not going to try and like re-record that because it would just probably be the same thing, you know, except like weird because it's a second recording of it. But yeah, that's a statement from Marin and Miller. I don't think there's too much else to say on the situation. Let me check really quick before we wrap this up. So there is this. Marin made a follow-up saying, as a note, there is a typo. I do not have the ability to qualify for pension and healthcare as a non-union performer, not pension and retirement. Bunny Chew saying, Supergiant recast you? What the frick? I'm sorry you're going through this. Response reads, it's kind of a misleading statement. Supergiant has no intention to recast them. However, they have decided to leave if Supergiant doesn't sign a union contract, which might impact other VAs on the project. Thus, if they do leave, Supergiant will have to eventually find a new Athena. And let's check this out really quick. User responds to Marin and says, so what would flipping actually involve on Supergiant's end? My understanding of these union contracts is somewhat limited. Marin responds and says, they most likely would need waivers for their production to take people like Darren, Logan, Greg into consideration, which would be brought up in initial negotiation. SAG AFTRA has the ability to meet clients where they are at, especially in a vulnerable time for developers for such a special team. Each non-union performer would need a 2-page Taft-Hartley form filled out by the client to let the union know they found a non-union actor they liked for the role. Depending on the actor's location, international and right-to-work rules apply for joining. But SAG AFTRA has created an entire new system for game jams and student waivers that would not trigger joining and take into consideration a no-profit scenario. We can make something work. So pompous to me. I'm like at a loss for words still because I'm in disbelief that these people think it's appropriate to try and change an entire project and get X number of people to also therefore have to sign pages of new contracts to continue working on something that they're already working on. This is like one of the most selfish things I've seen in a while. Like, it's just so crazy to me. I can't believe these people even feel good about themselves doing something like this. How are you okay with that? I'm going to inconvenience all these people, maybe even get some of them fired, maybe, if they don't get the Taft-Hartley. And I'm going to try and act like I'm the morally heroic one while I do it. It's frankly unbelievable, really. Back over on our games, there would be a post about Supergiant's response. Unfortunately, I don't see one about Marin's response. It would certainly be interesting to see what the comments on that one would be, as at least in my opinion, Marin's response made things even worse. But let's take a look at some of the public reception here, and then we'll wrap this up. A top response would read, as much as I respect VAs and what unions do to protect workers, things like this always rub me the wrong way. When it's one actor that goes on social media and asks their fans to be their personal army, that just makes the whole thing fishy in my eyes. None of the fans know what's going on behind closed doors. Is it a genuine call for help or a sleazy way to get a better deal out of the studio? They'd get a response that reads, the fact they didn't even name the studio is incredibly fishy. And because a lot of the focus got directed to Supergiant, if I was in the PR department, I'd be contacting the union and then the VA because that was seriously unprofessional. They're an adult. Act like one. At the very least, as long as you're in public, be it in person or on a professional, quote-unquote, social media page, and not a throwaway private one. And this comment that reads, crazy how many people started bashing Supergiant off one VA's vague and passive-aggressive posts. It's clear this strike and interim contract situation is complex and unclear even to the union VAs. Really, all the posts I saw, especially on the sub, wanted to wait for both sides of the story this time, and the ones who didn't were trashing on the VA instead of Supergiant. People are more cautious about this after the Bayonetta thing. Crazy, right? On this sub, maybe. But Supergiant got an influx of tweets /blue sky /etc. and negative game reviews. Yeah, from what I saw, most of the people defending Marin M. Miller and bootlicking for SAG were, to no surprise, over back on Blue Sky. Speaking of which, the OP would link back to Blue Sky, specifically the post that Marin M. Miller made, trying to rile everyone up and get them to email the company. Responses to that read, this reads like your recently divorced aunt vague posting on Facebook to stir stuff up so people ask, what's wrong, hun? They're 37 years old and getting up fans to go after coworkers on a project. It feels juvenile AF. Absolutely. This is bad form to stir up this level of drama and bad publicity over something that was not confirmed. Left a bad taste in my mouth for sure. And it's a shame that Supergiant probably can't fire them now, since it'll look bad. Basically meaning their terrible behavior will receive no pushback. And that leaves us in this weird void where I don't believe Supergiant has recast Marin M. Miller. But at the same time, Marin did say in the statement here, ball is in their court, recast or flip. So, not sure what's going on yet. There's not like a definitive conclusion here, I guess. But this was all 4 months ago. So I really do wonder where things are now, but I don't believe there's any more public information about this. So we will have to wait and see how this continues to unfold. Well, yeah, that's enough of this one for me. Holy smokes. What a freaking mess. How unprofessional, how obnoxious. Ugh, jeez. Let me know what you think about this whole thing in the comments. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the coverage. And if you did, please consider liking and or subscribing. I appreciate you. Look forward to seeing you in the comments and in the next one.